Allow me to break the ice. My name is Freeze. Learn it well.
Now listen, I like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I like him a lot. As a matter of fact, in an ironic way, I kinda love him in this role. But I also unironically loathe him in this role. Let me explain. Batman and Robin is a movie that should be commended for some of the things it did, but condemned for most of the things it did. For every good thing about it, there are probably 100 bad, and no character is more symbolic of this than the movie's Mr. Freeze. The studio made the decision to incorporate the new origin the animated series had created for the character, a tragic beginning that completely recontextualized and legitimized this rogue. This decision may seem like a no-brainer now, as the part was perfected by BTAS, with the character being revitalized and going from a D-list bad guy to one of Batman's most beloved and feared foes. But at the time, this story was only a couple years old, so seeing it transferred to the big screen so quick was quite frankly surprising. Regardless of how awful this story had told the tale, I still feel that bringing this narrative to the big screen did a lot to further cement the character's origins and make it a mainstay in most iterations of the Mr. Freeze story. Once again, in spite of how poorly this movie depicted these events. Not that this story needs to be overstated, as I'd like to think that most people are almost as familiar with Mr. Freeze's past as they are with Batman's beginnings. The SparkNotes edition is this. The only thing that ever ran deeper than Victor Freeze's love for science was his love for his wife Nora. Upon finding out that she was sick with a deadly ailment, Freeze then used his first love to try and save his true love, ultimately freezing her in a cryogenic sleep, and himself alive, forcing him to spend his life alone in the Arctic. Despite his cold blood and his cold nature, his love for his wife still burned, and in an attempt to cure her, he creates a suit to sustain his body heat, or lack thereof. He invents freeze rays in order to aid him in the crimes he commits as a means of finding a means to save his wife. There is no low he won't go to, no length he won't go to save the woman that he loves. That's kinda beautiful, as it sets Freeze apart from the rest of Batman's rogues gallery. Sure, he's equally as tragic as already established characters like Two-Face or Clayface or the Mad Hatter, but he lacks the lack of morality that a lot of Batman's rogues have. He knows what he's doing is wrong, but he doesn't care about his wrongdoings so long as he can make things right. He wasn't just some jolly bad guy looking to torment the world with Arctic temperatures and puns, except he is here. He is in characterization. There is a complete clash with the tone of this character. He comes from tragic origins, and yet he's not presented as a tragic figure. It's hard to identify with the character's suffering when the script has him dancing to A Year Without a Santa Claus in a polar bear robe with polar bear slippers on. Yeah, I'm not really feeling this guy's pain here. He's made such a goof in this movie that it makes you wonder why they even bothered, especially in a movie that hastily recreated Batgirl. To say this part was poorly profiled is an understatement. Despite staying true to the tale in the tale itself, the character in this story, in depiction, is the antithesis of the anti-hero. This Mr. Freeze doesn't feel like he's forced to do bad things for a good cause. He's practically giddy about doing bad things. Doing these bad things makes him feel good. He spends the vast majority of screen time smiling and making poor puns. Without exaggeration here, almost every line that he delivers comes with a punchline. When the primary point of Mr. Freeze is to crack jokes, I think you've missed the point of Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze's demeanor is meant to be as cold as his veins. He's so stoic that he almost comes off as lifeless. His pain was evident in his nearly nihilistic nature. He has a temperament as icy as his temperature. To take a character overcome and transformed by his grief and turn him into the movie's comedic relief, quite frankly, I think is the most egregious thing this movie does. And really, that's saying something. Making him the movie's joke machine makes the character a joke. On top of that, the movie makes the mistake of making Mr. Freeze, this man of genius-level intellect, just as buffoonish as Bane. who in this movie is a complete Neanderthal. He is easily swayed by poison ivy, which would make sense for most men, as her pheromones manipulate others into doing what she wants, but the movie makes a point to showcase that he's immune to her jewelweed mind tricks. Meaning the Mister here has no excuse for falling for such an obvious ploy. He's just dumb. He is just stupid. He's easily persuaded despite her obvious betrayal. It turns the good bad doctor into Poison Ivy's dopey accomplice. How could Mr. Freeze reasonably not see through her very thinly veiled jealousy? Having Mr. Freeze trust his frozen wife in the hands of someone who despises her makes him an incompetent fool. It's a portrayal that feels like a betrayal to the character. It doesn't help matters that Freeze actor Arnold Schwarzenegger plays the part more comedic, more cartoony, and more campy than any Mr. Freeze actor from the actual 1966 Batman series. Don't believe me? Let's compare.
But now, the famous star of Kashmir Diamond, if you please. The star, immediately.
In this universe, there's only one absolute everything. Jesus.
Batman, but you were supposed to be a famous Frosty Freezy by now.
I will freeze the city. Then I will hold Gotham ransom. Unless the city bows to my demands, it's winter forever here in Gotham.
Iceman, to the attack!
Kill the heroes! Yes, kill them! Kill them! Yes!
However, I do want to make a point here, because everyone said that this is terrible casting right from the start. And you're right, but I also feel like there's a little asterisk there. While Arnold Schwarzenegger isn't exactly the most obvious casting choice for the part, a fact which is made that much more obvious and more apparent when you learn of the other casting choices that were considered for the role, names like Anthony Hopkins, Ed Harris, and even Patrick Stewart, all of which could be ideal candidates for the role, but all of which who would feel way too overqualified and completely out of place in this mess of a movie. Despite this, I will say that if you think about it, there actually might have been some merit in casting Arnie in the part. He'd previously played a pretty iconic, stoic creature obsessed with achieving his primary mission, and not letting anything get in his way. If only that's what he was asked to do here. All I'm saying is that if the Terminator showed up to a Batman set to play Mr. Freeze, that might have actually been something historic. Instead, the dude from Junior and Jingle All the Way showed up to play Mr. Freeze, and that was something historically horrific. So while Arnold Schwarzenegger was never the best person to play the part, I do think him playing the part in this film is sort of a best case scenario. As terrible as he is here, I don't think anyone can argue that he's right at home. He's as bad as the movie that he's in. He is absolutely awful in the most awesome of ways. Watching him act, or whatever it is that you call that he's doing here, is a lot of fun. And you just know the guy's having a good time with it. Without question, Arnie's time in the role is highly entertaining, just not for the right reasons. For as bad as this is, no one can claim that it's not memorable. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. It's bad. It's really, really bad. But it's so bad that it's actually good. Except it's not good, it's bad, but it's good that it's bad. So you understand now. This is definitely not how I want to see my favorite villain portrayed. It's definitely not the best way of showcasing his story. It's not a great characterization of the character. This is the worst Mr. Freeze there's ever been, and I'm willing to bet the worst Mr. Freeze there ever will be. It's just surprising that the bar was set this low by a man who spent all of his life raising them. Now, however, I will say, if you look outside the poor performance brought on by a misguided director, in terms of the suit, you could say we're of two minds on the subject. The suit is wholly original, and this may be a controversial opinion. This may be what the kids today call a hot take, but I kinda dig it. I say that with the caveat of it being in this movie. I don't think this would translate well in any other medium. The helmet, you know what, actually, I'm gonna take that back. Change the helmet and take away the signature nipples. You actually got something good here. I like the armored bodysuit with glowing blue pieces. It makes it look like the suit is functioning, it's doing something. The helmet throws me off a little bit, I'm gonna be honest with you. It's not great. Because you'd think the whole point of him wearing it is to allow him to breathe and survive, but there's no cover over his face. So how is this supposed to reasonably keep him from heat? Now you can argue that this is me thinking way too much about it, but I would argue that they didn't think enough about it. Aside from a helmet that serves no other purpose than being a hat with a strap, I think this design works, and I would not hate seeing something like this duplicated. Modernized, and hopefully once again with a better helmet, but I don't hate it. I do not hate it. I wouldn't hate seeing some of this design repurposed. All in all, I think this serves as the bottom of the barrel for the character. A what not to do when making a Mr. Freeze. A part famous for being infamous. The worst version of one of the best characters.
His name is Bane.
A laundry service that delivers. Wow!
A lot of the time when people think of Batman and Robin, they think of the bat nipples. They think of how awful George Clooney was as Batman, and the incessant whining of Chris O'Donnell as Robin. The ice puns of Arnold Schwarzenegger's Mr. Freeze, the hammy over-the-top acting of Uma Thurman as Poison Ivy. And maybe some even remember Batgirl. Not many, but some. But what's less talked about is Batman and Robin's horrendous rendition of Bane. The part was played by professional wrestler Jeep Swenson, better known by his ring name. Oh, yeah, I'm not reading that one. You guys could go ahead and Google that on your own time. But the problems with this part have nothing to do with who was playing him, and everything to do with the creative that was writing him. How could you blame Jeep Swenson when the script just asks him to throw punches, break stuff, and walk? He was tasked with so little, and because of that, he failed in a grand and spectacular way. At the end of the day, what's there to even say about this one? There's hardly even a performance to talk about here. Because in this movie, Bane isn't a person, he's a prop. He's a prop for the plot to use whenever it's convenient. And strangely enough, often, it's not. He makes very little impact on the actual movie, and he makes less of an impact on the audiences that are watching this movie. It's sad to see in general, but it's exceptionally upsetting when compared to his comic book counterpart, who is essentially his polar opposite. Besides the name, mask, and use of the drug Venom, the two masked behemoths have next to nothing in common. Bane was created to be Batman's ultimate threat, a villain who can outmatch the Dark Knight in both bouts of brawn and brain. He was a super genius with super strength, but it would seem that no one gave Joel Schumacher that memo. As in this movie, Bane is made the mindless muscle. Case in point, they literally referred to the Batman figure set of Bane vs. Batman as brain versus brawn. He works as Poison Ivy's henchman, serving her every command. She rules over him not with the use of her poisonous kisses, but instead by friendship, I guess. They're buddies, I suppose. Look, I don't know, the script says they are, but whatever, it makes more sense than the plant lady teaming up with the dude from the Arctic. Their partnership, while unexplained and really just coming about because, well, just because, isn't nearly as offensive as this movie's characterization of the character, or lack thereof. He certainly doesn't have his high IQ or extended vocabulary, now speaking only in one-word sentences, most of which only being made up of words he randomly repeats from other people's sentences. As a matter of fact, here are all Bane's spoken lines in the film outside his moans, groans, and shouts. And I assure you, this won't take nearly as long as you might think.
I call this little number Bane.
Step on it.
Stop.
Enough monkey business. We've got work to do.
Monkey work.
Honey, clean up this mess. We've got company coming.
Honey. Company.
Exit, Bane.
Exit. No matter what they tell you, Mr. Bane, it is the size of your gun that counts. Gun. Is the party over? Over. Bomb. 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 But leave me the bat. Bat.
They made him into a goofy goon, and that's really upsetting for this particular character. There are so many other Batman characters that could be played for laughs in this mythos. Joker, Riddler, Eggman, the list goes on. There's about 1 million of these characters that you could potentially play for comedy. But Bane? Bane? The guy who shortly after his first appearance broke the Bat's back and spirit? This is who you want to do this with? Really? Aren't there better options? I don't know whose idea it was to make Bane a brainless brute, but I'm willing to bet it's someone who fits half that description.
A guy who was very smart, having a huge native intelligence. He was more than muscle. I mean, he was Batman's equal.
You just need someone to break down a wall, so he's a wonderful addition.
It's such a sad waste of a great character, and what's even worse is that it's done for incredibly cheap purposes. Being as the character serves no real narrative purpose past evening the battlefield during fight scenes, it feels like the only real reason for his inclusion in this movie is a cheap attempt at selling more toys.
That's why every Poison Ivy action figure comes complete with his!
Now, to be fair, as soulless and sad of a reason as that is, if this was in fact just a ploy to sell more toys, then they got me. Cause I bought it. No, literally, I had this Bane figure as a kid, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. That's coming from somebody who hated the movie at a very young age. We're talking about a character who's so inconsequential, they didn't even put him on the movie poster. Look! Nowhere to be seen! Actually, it's probably worse than I thought, because we're not just talking about his face not being on the movie poster, but they didn't even put his name down here at all. It's nowhere to be seen. You got Arnie, Georgie, Chris, Uma, Alicia, Michael Gow, Pat Hingle. They even have that one actress who had 2 scenes in the movie. But no Jeep Swenson. No Jeep Swenson. It's unfortunate. He means so little to the actual alleged movie that I struggled with even finding enough clips of him to use in this video. He had one cool scene in this movie, and no, that's not a nice pun. When Bane busts the bat signal, it's a fun moment, but it's also a moment that should have meant something. Typically when Bane does this in other media, as he's been known to do, it's to send a message. This is him not just destroying the bat signal, but also the bat symbol. The symbol that is Batman. When he breaks this, he's not just destroying an object, he's destroying what it represents. It's his way of showcasing that all hope for Gotham City is dead. But in this, he's just doing some maintenance work for Poison Ivy so that she could seduce the young man Wonder. So even though it's the same action, it doesn't carry the same weight. For all the many problems with this performance, again, or lack thereof, his appearance wasn't one of them. All things considered, especially considering the context of the glitzy glamour neon-lit Gotham City that existed in these movies, I think this look is a good look. It fits in with the world that Joel Schumacher was creating, and it stands out as probably one of the cooler concepts from the world that Joel Schumacher was creating. Again, speaking strictly from an aesthetic standpoint. Look, I'm really digging deep and searching far and wide to find like some good qualities to this, and this is all I got, so don't dispute it, okay? I will fold. It's not ideal, but I do think it's ideal for these line of films. I appreciate it for what it is, but that's really just all I appreciate about any of this. When talking about this Bane, I can't even sit here and tell you that I hated it, because there almost wasn't enough to hate. Like, my hatred had insufficient funds. I could maybe put down a deposit for a dislike, but that's really the best I could do. I'm not even invested enough to loathe it. As a matter of fact, I just sorta don't feel anything looking at this. Just feel real numb.
I don't even want to be around anymore.
What?
I don't want to be around anymore.
Like you don't want to live anymore?
Yeah.
I'm not mad, Joel. I'm just disappointed. In general, Bane probably wasn't the best character to try to translate into this line of Batman films. He wouldn't work for what they were going for. Case in point, this movie. What I find really weird about this whole thing is that he was brought in to be the muscle in a movie that starred Arnold Schwarzenegger. What? In what world? In what way? Why? Actually, just why? Why? Isn't that sort of a waste of both of their talents? I know that they tried to saddle Mr. Freeze up with an oversized lab coat prior to his frozen second coming, and then they put him in an extra large cyber suit after the fact, but none of that was fooling anybody. Mr. Freeze is more than capable enough of defending himself and Poison Ivy. I mean, come on, we're talking about pumping iron here. Outside of the attire and appearance, everything else about this alleged performance is a complete miss. Bane is a science experiment gone wrong that's been taken under the control of Poison Ivy. He's made to be the manipulated muscle. It really feels like the research that was done on this character began and ended at an ocular pat-down. They took one look at this guy and thought, a big guy, big muscle, that's it. Oh yeah, I get it. But clearly they didn't. Unlike the rest of the characters that are playing into the plot, Bane is just there to show off feats of strength and beat people up. I don't know if any direction was ever given to him past swing away. To the movie's credit though, and I really hesitate in saying that, I do think it was a good call bringing in a veteran professional wrestler for fight scenes. It's kinda already this man's area of expertise. And for whatever it's worth, I think a lot of the confrontations with this character feel legitimate to a degree. When he swings at the dynamic duo, it legitimately looks like he's trying to hurt them. Luckily for them, most of his offense is a swing and a miss. But yeah, this guy looks violent. I fought with even making this video because truthfully speaking, I didn't even know how warranted it was. And mind you, these videos are being made to showcase a history of every single villain, major or minor, in every single Batman movie. And still, even then, all things considered, I considered giving this one a pass. And keep in mind, there will be videos on Christopher Walken as Max Schreck, the Victor Zsasz and Carmine Falcone from Batman Begins, and even Sal Maroni from The Dark Knight. But this is the one that I thought, is it even worth making the video? And I still don't have the answer. Batman and Robin is maybe the most memorable Batman movie for all of the wrong reasons. It was a meme before memes were even a thing. For good reason. It's a live-action cartoon that couldn't take itself seriously even if it tried. Which it does not. But in a movie where every performance is a punchline, in a sea of so bad they're good performances, there dared to be one that was actually almost unironically good. You know, if you're grading on a curve. This includes the returning cast as well. With the exception of Alfred Pennyworth, because honestly that man was a national treasure. Uma Thurman's time as Poison Ivy might just be the one redeeming decision this mistake of a movie made. Now that's not to say that she feels out of place here. Quite the contrary actually, she's right at home. Acting every bit as campy and over the top as the cast that she shared a screen with. She's hammy, she's cheesy, she's goofy beyond belief. Though unlike her partners in crime, I think this theatrical performance works wonders for the part that she's playing. Actually, I would argue that this characterization suits the character. Poison Ivy has always been a self-righteous green enthusiast that treats plants as if they were people, treating those that pick flowers like they're murderers and those that cut their grass as genociders. She hates humanity and blames them for not protecting her precious babies, justifying actual murder due to trimming some hedges. Her very nature and enthusiasm for nature puts her in the over-the-top category already. So Uma Thurman giving an over-the-top performance is just sort of the perfect pairing. And while she's definitely kicking things up to an 11 at all times, I wouldn't say that her performance was all that bad. Sure, this is being played for laughs, but it doesn't feel too far off from other on-screen versions of the villain. Even some of the more iconic iterations of this rogue, actually. Like the out-at-the-time Batman the Animated Series. Take away the substance and add in a laugh track, and I don't see all that much of a difference. You have to remember that Poison Ivy's motivations, and even her speech patterns, don't really vary from interpretation to interpretation. She is widely the same, even if the stories are wildly different. No matter what the case is, she humanizes plants and demonizes human beings, constantly complaining about gardening problems on a grand scale. My point is that for as awesome of a character as Poison Ivy can be, I think inevitably she's always going to come off at least a little bit much, for lack of a better word. She's always going to be at least a little bit goofy. So having the movie make her intentionally goofy doesn't bother me nearly as much. Despite having a very different tone, Schumacher's Poison Ivy still stays in line with the character from the comics. As a matter of fact, out of all the antagonists in this adaptation, and to a lesser extent the movie that came out before it, I would argue that she is the most accurate adaptation. Sure, Mr. Freeze shares his animated series origins, but he has none of his charm or characterization. Gone was the Shakespearean tragedy, and in its place was puns that would make the 66 show blush. Bane still got the body, but he's lost all of his brain, looking like the character from the comics, but being made into a brainless brute to do Poison Ivy's bidding. Both bad guys are completely lost in translation. Mr. Freeze has made a joke and Bane is turned into a heavy, but Poison Ivy still feels like Poison Ivy. Out of everybody in the movie, she's really the only rogue that resembles her source material self. And I mean that both in terms of depiction and design, because I think this character really excelled aesthetically. She looked plucked straight from the comics. Pun intended. Not in the sense that she wore these outfits there, but these outfits are ones that you could easily see that character wearing. Her look complements her larger-than-life personality. It's loud and obnoxious. It demands attention when you're in its presence. Much like the character, Joel Schumacher was a visionary, with an emphasis put on vision. He wasn't a big picture kind of guy, but he made every frame in one of his movies look like a photograph. As a matter of fact, he was convinced Uma Thurman was right for the role, not after seeing some previous performance, but instead after seeing her on the cover of a magazine. Schumacher felt that she was the most beautiful woman in the world, which means his casting of her was entirely up to how she'd fill out the outfit rather than how she'd play the part. Not a great way of choosing who to cast necessarily, but it's hard to argue that she wasn't the right choice for that costume. I've seen plenty of people over the years cosplay this part. I'm talking good cosplayers who put a lot of time, investment, and money into their craft, and none of them ever even come close to looking like this. There's just something about this particular person in this specific part. I think she just had the right look for this look. It should also be noted that her wacky wardrobe served a purpose. The costumes weren't exactly subtle, but the fact that they're visual representations of her transformation seemed to get lost in translation, with each attire being inspired by a stage of metamorphosis, showcasing both the progression of her condition from the accident and her full turn to the dark side. So by the climax, she's gone full Venus flytrap supervillain. And it's actually kind of awesome. I'm not going to dance around it. This may be an unpopular opinion, I'm not really sure, but this design is definitive to me. When I think of Poison Ivy, I think of this. Once again, look-wise.
Great stems.
Buds, too.
Yeah, those are nice.
In terms of her performance, I think it's only bad in the sense that it fits the tone of a bad movie. Yes, it's non-stop nonsense. It's all style and no substance, and it could come off so dialed up that Broadway actors playing to the cheap seats might see this and tell her to tone it down. But it's Batman and Robin. If there was ever a place to play this part, it's here. Uma Thurman feels like a femme fatale pulled straight from the 66 series. I would even argue that she's in the same vein as that show's Catwoman, with the two being overly theatrical seductresses. They also share a similar style, what with the two both having the jumpsuit with a belt look. My point here is that I think that she'd be more endeared had she played the part there as opposed to here. So I think it's ultimately less about her and more about the project that she was a part of. Because people don't fondly remember Batman and Robin. So people don't fondly remember things about Batman and Robin. Being the best part of the worst Batman movie just equates to taking part in the worst Batman movie. Out of everyone who participated in Batman and Robin, Uma seems to be the only one who did so without any regrets. From all I've seen, read, and heard over the years, she's the only one to have never said a bad word about her time working on set, actually referring to it as a nice creative experiment on at least one occasion. And you know what? I think that definitely comes across. While Arnold looked like he was having fun at the expense of the project, Uma feels like she was having fun by playing into it, with her contribution feeling more welcome and significantly less distracting. But there are definitely things about this variant of the villain that I'm none too fond of. Whatever complaints I have about the character have very little to do with the actual actress playing her. I just think that the character overall comes across as very repetitive. She almost at times feels like a gender-swapped version of Jim Carrey's Riddler. It's never a good sign when you can use the same specific description to describe two separate characters. In Batman Forever, Jim Carrey is an overly emotional redhead with glasses looking to take revenge on their former employer, who unknowingly wronged them in some way. In Batman and Robin, Uma Thurman is an overly emotional redhead with glasses looking to take revenge on her former employer who unknowingly wronged her in some way. It's not just the backstory, they share similar mannerisms as well, as both act comedically unhinged to a cartoonish degree, chewing their way through all of the scenery. I would even go as far to say that some of the scenes with this character are carbon copies of scenes with that other character, which is the movie that just came out before this. But don't worry, it's not just the last movie's bad guy this movie's bad guy takes from. She also takes from the bad guy from the last movie, as her backstory is basically borrowed from Batman Returns' Catwoman. Both Selina Kyle and Pamela Isley have near identical origins. Both women were transformed into supernatural supervillains after their boss attempted to take their life. Both women then of course take revenge on their former employers, killing them off with a kiss goodbye, only to then get into conflict with the Caped Crusader.
Why are all the gorgeous ones homicidal maniacs? Is it me?
The problem is, this version of the villain was created from the ribs of other characters that were done much better. Rogues that were still at the time recent and in the general public's memory. This cheapens the character. Also, I don't love the love triangle this movie puts together. It's haphazard and half-assed.
You never said anything about a wife!
It also doesn't feel like a love triangle considering one of those people is barely present. It also doesn't feel like a story that Ivy would find herself in. I don't know that this was a necessity. I don't think it really added a lot to the plot. I think if anything, all it did was discredit Ivy, making her seem like an overly jealous, boy-crazy, dysfunctional mess. I don't know, Ivy having an interest in anything she didn't need to water and keep out in the sun feels like a stretch to me. She just doesn't have an attachment to people the way she does to plants. If anything, she has a total hatred of humanity. So I can't really see her falling head over heels and getting jealous of a man's love for his frozen wife. Ivy doesn't love. To be honest, she doesn't even really like. She just uses the lust of others through pheromone to get them to do her bidding. Love and lust are just weapons for her to use. She manipulates through emotion, so seeing her be manipulated by emotion just feels like a failure of the character as opposed to a fixture. I know some continuities have put her together with Harley over the years, and I'm willing to accept that as her one exception, but even in saying that, I find that pairing tolerable at best. Just not really my favorite use of Ivy, because in my opinion, Poison Ivy should be colder than Mr. Freeze. This may just be one of my most controversial Batman opinions, but I mean it when I say it. I ironically love Batman and Robin, but I unironically kinda love Uma Thurman's Poison Ivy. If there was anybody from this project I'd like to see return to the role they played, it would undoubtedly be her. Because I think that she played the part well for the project that she was a part of. She was a good, goofy Poison Ivy, but I also think if given the chance, she could probably play a much more menacing version of the Menace. This plant just needs a better environment to grow and thrive in. Having said all that, I hope you enjoyed me tanking my credibility by saying I like something about Batman and Robin. And if you want to ruin your credibility and let me know that you like this video, and you'd also maybe want to see more Batman content here on the channel, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
I think that's Poison Ivy.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was V Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.